When night falls over the cold land of Siberia, there are things not found on any map and never mentioned in official explanations. Not because they are secrets, but because no one can quite explain what they are. They linger in the gaps, in classified files with missing pages, in decades-old satellite data, corrupted by time or maybe by something else. There is one such story, buried beneath layers of denial, redacted memos, and forgotten hardware. And yet, it still flickers, across forums, across private archives, across the lips of those who should have forgotten. It begins in winter, in 1983, in the silence of space. At the height of the Cold War, the Soviet Union ran a program known simply as Cosmos. Many of its missions were public, launches logged, orbits tracked, but some were not. One of these classified payloads, Cosmos 1847, was launched from the Plesetsk Cosmodrome in the dead of night on a trajectory that took it outside routine surveillance corridors. Its purpose? Officially, high-altitude surveillance and radiation monitoring. Unofficially, we don't know. Not really. For 5 weeks, the satellite functioned normally. Daily telemetry, regular corrections, no errors. Then, on March 17, 1983, at exactly 0333 GMT, Cosmos 1847 recorded something it was never designed to capture. The satellite's Aurora imaging camera, an automated unit meant to track magnetic distortions, took a single photo while passing over a quiet, cloudless stretch of Siberia. What it saw should not have been there. The image, grainy, monochromatic, showed a black shape in the sky. Not a craft, not a shadow, not a cloud. A void. Geometrically perfect, vertical, elongated like a lens, hovering silently above the tundra. No blur, no motion distortion, no light refraction. It simply was. And then it wasn't. The next image, taken just 1.2 seconds later, showed only open sky. No heat, no radiation, no trace. Engineers flagged the anomaly immediately. They assumed a sensor glitch, but the metadata said otherwise. There was no malfunction, no spike, no drop. The shutter opened, the shutter closed, and it recorded something that didn't belong in the sky. Within hours, the image file was removed from the shared system. Backups deleted, access logs scrubbed. Only a handful of prints remained, sealed in an envelope stamped "Nie podleżet obsujdzeniu," not for discussion. But people talk. One technician, identified later only as Anton, shared a description of the photo with a colleague in Leningrad. The story spread in whispers. Some said the shape was a dimensional wound, something outside light itself. Others believed it was a temporal fold, a slit in the rules of time. And a few called it surveillance, not from another planet, but from beneath physics itself. No theory stuck. Because no theory explained the most chilling part, the location. The void had hovered over a stretch of land near the Tunguska region, the same area flattened by a mysterious explosion in 1908. 80 million trees. No crater. No explanation. What are the odds? So what was it? A machine? A doorway? A shadow of something worse? For the next 3 weeks, Cosmos 1847 continued transmitting, but the data grew erratic. Instruments misfired, clocks fell out of sync, telemetry drifted, and then silence. No shutdown, no final log, just one last transmission, containing nothing but static, laced with soft, repeating pulses. Some said they matched Morse code. Others claimed they mimicked human brainwave frequencies. When decoded, the message read only, "You saw it." Anton disappeared not long after. The technician who spoke, who leaked the description, who wasn't supposed to. Some say he defected. Others believe he was relocated by the KGB. But one version of the story ends with his final journal entry: "The sky has seams, and we caught one opening." To this day, the photo has never been released officially, but every few years, a corrupted copy appears in the dark corners of the internet. Always the same grain, the same shape, the same wrongness. Digital forensics show no signs of tampering, and those who stare too long report the same symptoms: a high-pitched ringing, a feeling of pressure behind the eyes, a sense of falling forward or backward or nowhere at all. Maybe it was just a glitch. Maybe it was something the satellite wasn't meant to see. Or maybe it was never meant to be photographed at all. And every camera since still hopes not to see it. After the disappearance of Anton and the satellite's final cryptic broadcast, Cosmos 1847 was quietly retired from internal records. It no longer appeared in orbit logs. Its mission ID was absorbed into a broader category: anomalous terminations. No statement was released, no explanation offered, no funeral held for the satellite that may have glimpsed something we were never meant to see. But inside the Soviet scientific community, the ripple had already begun. It was no longer about what the camera saw. It became about where it saw it, and why that place seemed to echo. The coordinates of the anomaly matched more than just the Tunguska event. They aligned with a series of lesser-known, quietly dismissed cases. 1956. A weather plane flying low over the same region lost all instruments for exactly 3 minutes and 33 seconds. When contact resumed, the pilot described a black hole in the sky. His words, not metaphor, no radar interference, no storm. Just a perfect oval of absence hovering above the tree line. The pilot was grounded. His report, dismissed. The file, archived, buried, never explained. Then came the cosmonaut report. Classified until the early 2000s, it detailed an incident during a spacewalk on Salyut 6, a Soviet space station in low Earth orbit. A cosmonaut, performing routine repairs, saw something flicker in the stars. Not a shadow, not debris. A line of nothing, widening, then snapping shut. He later said, "It was a shape that made me forget what shapes were." He never flew again. No official connection was ever made. But behind closed doors, patterns began to emerge. A small cluster of physicists, theorists, radio technicians proposed a hypothesis: a hyperspatial irregularity, a phenomenon where space-time could fold, intersect, or fray, outside the reach of modern physics. But the papers were intercepted, redacted, rewritten as harmless speculation, and those who pushed too hard, reassigned, retired, silenced. So what are we left with? A photograph of something that doesn't reflect light. A satellite that went dark after seeing it. A region of land where things vanish. And whispers. Always the whispers. Modern accounts exist. A hunter in 2002 claimed his dog vanished mid-step on a frozen lake near Tunguska. No sound. No splash. No trace. A group of hikers once found their own footprints in the snow, reversed, leading not away from camp, but toward it, as if something had returned. And then there's the story of the radio tower, built outside the Anomaly zone in 1991 to monitor atmospheric data. One night, it received a burst transmission, loud, sharp, almost digital noise. But beneath it was a voice. Russian, male, calm, saying, "I see you too." There were no transmitters on that frequency, no broadcasts scheduled. The voice never repeated. By the late 90s, most of the satellite's hardware, once sealed in state labs, was either lost, privatized, or quietly destroyed. Only fragments remain. A lens assembly, a warped hard drive, a heat shield casing, serial code, K1847 to 3A. They sit in boxes, unlabeled, untouched, forgotten, or maybe left alone on purpose. But still, people go looking. Young engineers, graduate students, archivists with too many questions. They trace old launch data, they cross-reference flight paths, and eventually, they find the image. It's always the same, grainy, uneven, warped at the edges, a floating shape in the sky that doesn't reflect, refract, or belong. It's not just black, it's absence. And those who stare too long describe a feeling, like falling, but not downward, inward. As if the photo doesn't show an object, but an opening. So what does that mean? Was Cosmos 1847 the first machine to witness a tear in reality? A fold in space? A window to something else? Or was it all Cold War paranoia? A coincidence? A trick of light? Some physicists suggest gravitational lensing, a rare warping of light, but that doesn't explain the pulses, the silence, the message. You saw it. If that was a message, who sent it? And more importantly, who was it for? By the early 2000s, the Cold War had ended. The Soviet archives, once sealed with iron discipline, began to crack, quietly, selectively. It was in these brief windows of openness that a few more pieces surfaced. A retired radio operator from the Baikonur Cosmodrome, Lev Makarov, granted a single interview to an independent science journal. He described a test transmission in 1983, just days after Cosmos 1847 recorded its infamous image. The satellite pinged a simple verification. What came back wasn't the ping. A soft, rhythmic loop. Not binary, not encoded, not even language, but something that felt like breath. The waveform, visualized on the monitor, looked like a collapsing tunnel, a circle folding inward. They shut the signal down, deleted the file. But Makarov remembered the shape. Years later, when the image leaked, he recognized it. It wasn't a void. It was the same loop, flattened, stretched across the sky, as if the satellite hadn't photographed an object, but a reply. From there, the theory changed. Cosmos 1847 hadn't just seen something. It had made contact, not with a ship, not with a being, but with a boundary. Something embedded in the fabric of space, unmapped, unmeasured, and possibly aware. A physicist, Dr. Elena Rozova, wrote under a pseudonym in 2011. The universe is not a fixed volume, but a layered narrative, each reality folded over the last. Sometimes, under intense observation, a fold lifts, and something behind it becomes visible. She called these moments observer fractures. Her work was ignored, then removed, but later, quietly cited, under different names. One line still survives, buried in an old forum. It may not be that we saw something. It may be that something saw us seeing it. And that's when the symptoms began. Researchers who handled the image began to report vivid, repeating dreams of tunnels, loss of spatial awareness, persistent, high-pitched ringing, and in one case, whispered coordinates from the Tunguska zone. One researcher asked to see the image again. He later forgot his name. For hours he repeated one line: "There is no time there, only forward." Some now believe the image, even just seeing the image, alters perception. That it's not a photo, it's a signal. Or worse, a key. A team attempted to clean the image with AI enhancement. They regretted it. The more they refined it, the emptier it became. The center remained blank, always. No stars, no depth, no noise, just structured absence. One engineer called it a recursive eye, an image that, when enhanced, folds into itself. They destroyed the drive, but not all copies were lost. Today, fragments still surface, encrypted channels, hard-to-find boards, old CDs labeled Window 13 or Echo 0. People don't keep them for long. Their hardware breaks, their screens flicker. Some say it's superstition. Others say something watches not from the image, but from behind it. So maybe it was all coincidence, an old Cold War photo distorted by paranoia. Or maybe it was something else, a fracture in the simulation, a seam in the sky, or worse, an invitation. Because if that shape wasn't a machine or a void or a hole, then maybe it was an eye, and we didn't just see it, it saw us. In the years since Cosmos 1847 drifted silently out of orbit and into memory, one question has lingered like a half-formed thought in the back of every curious mind. What exactly did we see? And what did it mean that we saw it by accident? Most phenomena we observe in science are repeatable. That's the foundation of understanding. If you can measure it twice, it exists. But the void in the sky, that cold, perfect tear photographed above Siberia, has never appeared again. Not publicly, not officially, only in rumors. Like the story told by a Norwegian amateur astronomer in 2009, who claimed his telescope lens was blinded for 0.8 seconds while capturing aurora data. Not by the sun, nor a plane. Not by any recorded satellite. Just a spot in the sky that turned black, like something swallowed light itself. He never found a cause. The manufacturer said it was sensor fatigue. But the coordinates? They matched the trajectory of Cosmos 1847. Another account, this one from a former NASA imaging specialist, surfaced in a redacted interview leaked online in 2017. When asked what the most unsettling thing he'd ever seen was, he didn't hesitate. A Soviet photo from the 80s. One of ours got a copy after the USSR collapsed. It showed nothing, but it wasn't empty. It was wrong, like a bruise in space, like a door with no frame. He paused, then added, I had dreams for months after, not nightmares, just falling. Some believe the anomaly was a result of classified weapons testing, a nuclear-adjacent experiment designed to test gravitational distortion. That it created a momentary rift, visible only to high-orbit sensors. But that theory fails to explain the lack of energy signature, the absence of radiation, or the calm precision of the shape. No heat, no motion, just stillness. Others suggest it was a data injection, a Cold War hoax planted by Soviet intelligence to confuse Western analysts. But that doesn't explain the internal panic, the sealed memos, the dismantled teams, the retired engineers who refused to speak publicly until decades later. Nor does it explain the silence of the satellite itself, its sudden death after the encounter. Satellites don't get frightened. They don't decide to stop functioning after seeing something strange. Do they? There's a final theory, one that has grown in the quiet corners of scientific philosophy and speculative physics. It suggests that Cosmos 1847 caught a reflection, not of light, but of reality itself. That what it saw wasn't in front of the lens, but behind the fabric of existence. A rupture, a negative, a glimpse of the absence required for reality to have form. Like the back of a painting, never meant to be seen, but always there. Some physicists refer to this idea as metaphysical inversion, the point at which our tools begin to observe things not in the physical world, but in the structural code beneath it. Sound like science fiction? Maybe it is. But ask yourself, how many times in history has something been called impossible before becoming standard science? Electricity, X-rays, black holes, even dark matter, which now makes up the majority of the known universe, was once dismissed as a mathematical error. So what if this is the next step? Not what we see, but what's watching the seeing. The object, if it was an object, has not reappeared. But the effects have. Accounts of sudden audio dropouts in surveillance drones, glitches in satellite telemetry that sync at exactly 3:33 a.m. GMT. Photos corrupted by nothing. No pixels, no noise, just perfect, circular absence. Always in the same place, always above the same woods. And still, no official acknowledgement, no agency, no government. Only a recurring silence that feels too intentional, too knowing. As if even the institutions that study the stars know not to look too long in certain directions. The final report from Cosmos 1847, What Little Survived, was time-stamped 03:33:33. Its last line of machine-readable code, 0001, 001, 0001, loop, return. Null return, null return, null. It could mean nothing, or it could mean everything. So here's the question, one that lingers in the still air between fact and fiction. What if our machines have already touched something outside of time? Not a visitor, not an accident, but a constant presence, invisible until we stare directly into its blind spot. A mirror with no reflection, a watcher that never blinks. And if it looked back, what did it see in us?